Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our October 24th School Board Business Meeting. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Birdsong? Here. Ms. Crawford? Here. Mr. DiBenedetto? Dr. Chris Gonzalez? Here. Ms. Truman? Here. Mr. Wallace? Here. Ms. Emo?
Here. Thank you. At this time, we will be led with our belief statement and Pledge of Allegiance by our student reps.
We believe that every student has the right to an excellent education in a safe, experiential, and imaginative learning environment. Every student deserves equitable opportunities to learn, grow, lead, and serve. An intentional focus on future-ready skills and dispositions, integrated with essential academic knowledge, develops an empowered 21st century graduate. Mental, emotional, and physical health are essential conditions for optimal learning.
Collective efficacy and shared accountability are vital ingredients to a productive, empowered workforce. Winchester Public Schools must be learner-centered, agile, and courageous in modeling the power of public education across our Commonwealth, country, and world. A vibrant public education system positively impacts the social, economic, and civic well-being of Winchester. Embracing the diversity of our students, their families, and our community is a strength that unifies us. To achieve equity, we must clearly define and monitor the extent to which all learners and groups are empowered through access, diversity, and inclusion. Please rise. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That moves us to item D on our first part of our agenda, I guess that's me, Chairman's comments. No comments at this moment. I may have some later. So at this time, I'll pass it over to Superintendent.
I just have a couple quick comments just about some of the happenings in our school division lately. Just really focusing on Friday as a microcosm of all the incredible fun things that we do in school. Was able to visit Frederick Douglass Elementary School for their Hispanic Heritage celebration. That was a lot of fun and made me want to move back to South America, not South Carolina, South America, with all the festivities and whatnot. Then was over at Virginia Avenue for the Global Palooza, not the Global Paluska. The Global Palooza, and watching kids all go all in on Australia as part of their global theme. They were jumping like kangaroos. They were learning about the barrier reef, etc. And then, of course, at the fall day at Hanley High School, homecoming. I think you had a great homecoming week. So, Susan, thank you for your leadership there. And by all accounts, students had a great time and great traditions there at Hanley High School. So that's going on in all of our schools. I didn't make it to Quarles and Kerr and Daniel Morgan Middle or Intermediate School, but that's happening every single day at our schools. Not only are we academically pressing our kids and making sure that our students are learning towards our standards of learning, but we make school a fun and exciting place to be. So thank you to our leaders. They're here tonight because we're doing our annual report, so thank you, principals, for being here tonight as well.
Thank you, Dr. Van Huykelen. At this time, I will open up the floor for board comments. I'll start here with Mr. Wallace. Mr. Birchman?
Just a quick one. You guys all have a copy of the VSBA for proposed legislative positions and amendments. The hybrid meeting is 11:10. If you have anything you want me to know about before then, please let me know. That's it.
Thank you. Dr. Pierce-Gonzalez?
Just a word of appreciation. We had our school board retreat last Wednesday, and I really appreciate how this board is able to work together and tackle some really difficult decisions, keeping students and teachers at the forefront of our decision-making processes. And to give a shout out to Ms. Carmen down there at the end, Team Carmen, BPG. We took the gold this year. Sorry, Ms. Truman, and Maggie, wherever she is. I saw her earlier. There she is. She got the perfect, right while we were in the middle of a high five, she got a perfect picture. So we need to run it back again next year.
Thank you. Ms. Truman? Ms. Crawford? All right, thank you. I'll open it up now for our student reps. We'll start with you, Axel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first, at Daniel Morgan Intermediate, they are completing their sixth grade local history field trip today. So that seems exciting. And they also have a boo or woohoo parade within the building next Monday to receive tricks and treats from staff. At Frederick Douglass this month, they continue to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, and they had their assembly that featured dancing, music, and traditional dress from several different countries. And they will celebrate their love for literacy this month with their annual Dress Like Your Favorite Character book character day. They will also be hosting their first trunk or treat this Friday at Frederick Douglass. And I also noted that I feel like the favorite book character day was definitely important because I know it's from a young age, it's important to start to really get excited about books when it doesn't seem that exciting at first. And at Virginia Avenue, they had student-led conferences with great attendance on the 20th. And this week is the Joy of Reading and Red Ribbon Week. So today they had pajamas and buddy reading. Tomorrow they will be having guests from Shenandoah football players to be reading to students about just being against drugs to further elaborate on Red Ribbon Week. And the rest of the week there's more activities planned for Red Ribbon Week, so that's very exciting for those students. And at Hanley, we are getting ready to have our Hispanic Heritage Month Assembly on Wednesday to wrap up the end of this month of celebration. And this past week, we had our first normal homecoming since 2019. And we had a great time winning the silver gavel for the seniors. And I'll now pass it off to Olivia.
Thank you. I'd first like to apologize for my voice. We had fall week and homecoming. I think I showed my Hanley pride a little too much. Sorry about that. So for the month of October, Daniel Morgan celebrated their first PBIS Reward Day. Students participated in outdoor activities and had Maddie's ice cream. 8th graders took a field trip to the World of Works at Shenandoah University, where they learned about various careers this week. This week, students are supporting Red Ribbon Week through a variety of Spirit Day activities. At Corals Elementary, they have 8 new ducklings who are 4 days old and creating lots of snuggles. There have been a lot of great field trips, including origami at the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley and visits to Hanley Regional Library and the nearby apple orchards. Red Ribbon Week kicked off this week, and today they were superheroes. Metrics after-school clubs are rocking, and students love the experiences. Swimming for fourth grade students started after school, and students are loving that opportunity. At John Kerr Elementary, for the month of October, one of the biggest celebrations was the Fall Shindig on October 13th. Students had a blast. They had to show character traits of pride, P representing perspective, R representing respect, I representing integrity, D representing discipline, and E representing excellence. There were plenty of games, music, dancing, treats, and more. Their PBIS referral data has dropped significantly, and the focus has been on building meaningful relationships with students while holding them to high standards. Students are now working on November's Math House Challenge. JKES also won the attendance challenge held by the district for the month of September. They won 3 of the 4 weeks. Every student and teacher is receiving a t-shirt announcing their accomplishment. Attendance was so high that they are continuing their own in-house challenge with classes with the best weekly attendance receive special treats such as popcorn and a movie. Their MCL and Reach Associate received great feedback on the work they're doing with the kindergarten team. They completed their school improvement plan, making sure every voice was heard able to give feedback, and everyone feels accountable for their goals. Their book fair was very successful, and their fun run has commenced and is going very well. And then finally at Hanley, we celebrated Fall Week last week, and on Friday we played games, had boys volleyball, and played powder puff. We had Spirit Days leading up to homecoming on Saturday, and during the week, each grade level competed against each other for the silver gavel, which the seniors did win. And for sports, boys cross country won the district, and the girls took fourth place. Both teams will be moving on to regionals.
Thank you for that. All right. Now we're moving on to item number 2 on our agenda this evening, which moves us to recognitions. We do have 4 recognitions. We'll start with Ms. Anderson Holman, recognizing her for her board service. Ms. Holman, would you do us the honor and standing up? And I know that we've kind of done this almost like informally before, and you weren't here, you weren't able to make that meeting, but we did want to do this formally in your presence and just to really show our appreciation to you and all the work that you've done since you've been on the board. And I know that your work is still going to continue. I've seen many emails already from you as a parent, which offers some different insights, so we really appreciate that. If I may, I did want to read the resolution, which you will see in our consent agenda, if that's okay, and then I'll open up the floor and for anyone that would like to have a few remarks. Okay, so this is a resolution of the Winchester School Board for Ms. Holman. Whereas Karen Anderson Holman has served as a member of the Winchester Public School Board from September 23, 2014 until July 18, 2022. And whereas she has performed all the duties of her appointment with diligence, faithfulness, integrity, and a sacrifice of much personal time. And whereas during her tenure on the board, she has provided a valuable service as a board member and vice chairman, as well as the board's representative to numerous committees within the division and the board's delegate to the Virginia School Boards Association. And whereas during her tenure, she has been a courageous leader and champion for equity and stood for quality education, responsible stewardship of resources, promoted the welfare of children, sought the employment of the best professional staff, and supported continued curriculum development in order to maintain the excellence of Winchester Public Schools. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Winchester Public School Board express publicly to Karen Anderson Holman their grateful appreciation for her valuable service to the citizens of the city of Winchester and their children, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution signed by members of the Winchester Public School Board duly enacted be framed and presented to Karen Anderson Holman as a testimonial of their respect for and gratitude to her, and that a copy be incorporated into the minutes of the Winchester Public School Board and forwarded to the Hanley Board of Trustees and to the Common Council of the City of Winchester. So I would like to open up the. Thank you. This is on behalf of the school board, and we just want to again thank you so much for your work. And I want you to know that we are going to continue carrying that torch, and the work that you started will not end, but we will continue. And so we are just really appreciative of everything that you've done and contributed to Winchester. If I may, I would like to open up the floor. It's already open for anyone that would like to say a few words or remarks for Ms. Holman. I'll start down here. Mr. Wallace? I don't want to put you guys on the spot. I know we've already done this kind of, but I just wanted to give you another opportunity if you would like.
Like I said before, you're a trailblazer, and I appreciate everything you've done. You blazed the way, and I hopefully can keep moving that trail on, passing the torch on to somebody else to keep going on. Your work has definitely done a great impact to our students, and I appreciate you for it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Karen, I think I said it last time, but, I sincerely appreciate everything that you did for us. I will say the meetings have gotten shorter. I don't know. That's neither to you, but just saying. But no, seriously, we appreciate you. We miss you. Keep in touch, please.
The mark that you've left in this community, Ms. Holman, there's lots of tangible ways to recognize and acknowledge that, but there's some immeasurable ways as well. And I look at you, honestly, personally, as a kind of like a role model. Before you serve up on this board or on any kind of public office, I think you haven't yet cultivated your voice in that capacity, your public voice, if you will. And I think I modeled mine after watching you for a good couple years up here. So that's probably one of the pieces of your legacy that you are unaware that you have left behind, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
That was awesome.
Ms. Holman, I didn't bring any tissues tonight, so I can't go back to the last meeting and articulate last time because I'm ill-prepared with tissues for that. But I just have such great admiration for everything that you've given to this community and the kids. Couldn't really say it any better than Brian. You know, someone many of us worked with used to always say, at times you just have to borrow a little bit of courage from somebody else. And there were so many times, and will be more times in the future, whether it's here serving on the board or in my own personal life or professional life, where I know I will rely upon borrowing courage from you. So thank you for all you've done. Your work here will last a lifetime. So thank you, Karen.
Ms. Holman, I would like to thank you for your outstanding service and your expertise and your knowledge of the law. It was an honor serving with you. I wish it had been longer because I could learn from you. You know, even you just reading over, you know, procedures and just getting an understanding, being a new board member. So I thank you so very much for your time and your service.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Ms. Holman, would you like to address the board with any words or our community? You don't have to. I just wanted to give you an opportunity just in case you wanted to.
Thank you. I thought about writing something down, but I thought, no, I don't want to do that. I'm so appreciative of each of you, to Vince who's not here, to those that were on the board and have left, Mr. Bell, Allison, Pate. There's so many, Mary Margaret, who have served during my time on the board. I learned so much from this board and so much from my service on the board, and I am appreciative to each and every one of you as well, Dr. Van Huculum, to Marie for your leadership. When I joined this board, it was because I wanted to advocate for my son, who was just getting ready to go into kindergarten. And I worried about him. I worried a lot about him because he learns differently. He's cute and he's all of that, but he is a different child when you have to interact with him one-on-one. I don't think it's because of anything I did, but I think it's because of the caliber of individuals who work for this division. I was fortunate to participate in a parent-teacher meeting last week, and the supports that were put in place for Christopher have helped him immeasurably. As I look back on the teachers that have worked with him, who are representative of the teachers in this division, the support staff in this division. All I can say is, wow. I mean, this is such an amazing, amazing community, and it has been a privilege to serve on this board. My son is in 8th grade now, so that was 8 long years ago that I started this journey. He is straight A's. He still struggles in some ways, but he has teachers who look at him as an individual, not just as, a kid. And they see him for who he is, and they work to meet his needs. And what they do for my son, I know they do for each and every child that's in this division, and I could not be more grateful and humble to have been a part of this governing board for the school division. I appreciate you, Dr. Van Hukkelen, for your leadership. It's scary. It's scary serving. It's scary putting yourself out there. Sometimes I just said, I don't care, but now I'm a little bit grown up and I have to behave, and I do so. But I am absolutely so grateful to each and every one of you. I'm so grateful to all of you as well. I can point out the faces that have interacted with my child, and all I can say is if every child in this division receives what my son did, whether or not they have a big mouth parent like I am, each and every one of those children are going to go far. Because we've said our kids can go from Hanley to Harvard. We have kids that do amazingly well with this little itty bitty place in the northern Shenandoah Valley. I think that is something for all of us and for this community to be proud of. And I am so grateful that I've had an opportunity to be a part of it. And I'm so grateful for the recognition. And don't worry, Mike, Brian's getting his feet under him. The meeting length will continue to grow. Thank you.
Karen, hold on one second. I want to say thank you. It's been a joy to serve with you over my 7 years as your superintendent. You hired me, so appreciate that, of course, as well. What I'd like to say to everyone in the room and to anyone who's listening online is, to me, the words smart, articulate, tenacious come to mind when I think of your service and your role on the board. But then also the work that you have that will have a lasting impact include policy work that is literally codified in writing in this school division. But then also your thumbprints on the DNA of who we are and what we care about and our values. And so that's my challenge to all of us, those on the board, myself, is that we remember that, because your legacy is passed on to us and we need to pass that on to others. And so I know that we will do that, and you have a lot to be proud of, and we are so proud of you. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, we're still in recognitions. That moves us to our WEF Executive Director introduction. We have Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. I'm Maddie Rodriguez, the president of the Winchester Education Foundation. We had the opportunity today to meet with some of our board members and your board. And before I introduce Mr. Wise, I do want to just take a moment just to introduce the rest of our board that is here. I think it's important that you know who is out there working for our schools, not just our schools, our teachers, our parents, our students, just everyone in general. But we have Martha Roberson here. She is our secretary. We have Kathy Thomas, who's on our board. We have Irina Kanin, who is vice president. And then we had earlier Lisa Fry, who is our treasurer. We have Tommy Dixon here as well. He's on our board. We have Bill Armstrong, who wasn't able to make, well, he was here earlier, but had to leave, right? We have Nate Adams is on our board as well, and then we have Dennis Haston is on our board as well. So just wanted to take a moment to, put a face on some people so that, as we're working forward here in the future, you can understand who we are and what we're doing. But I do want to introduce, we have a newly appointed executive director, Larry Weiss, with us today. So just wanted to take a moment to let him say a few words.
Thank you, Maddie. Good evening, and thank you, board, for allowing me to visit with you earlier this evening. I had a chance to speak to many of the board members, as well as some of the principals who were in attendance tonight. I'm very excited about the opportunity to join the WEF and help it as it moves into a new chapter. I believe that, you know, we have 4 constituencies here that really can all work together as we move into the future. The school board, of course, the principals, the rest of the staff, the teachers, and of course the students. And we all need to really come together, and I look forward to working with each of those individual groups to really focus on the student and the teacher experience. At the end of the day, it's all about educating our children in the most effective way that we possibly can here in Winchester, and I look forward to helping the WEF be part of that mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Before you sit down, I just want to open up the floor for any school board members that would like to maybe ask a question or direct a comment to Ms. Rodriguez or Mr. Weiss while you have an opportunity. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. All right, that moves us to C on our recognitions, Frederick Douglass Elementary School Showcase. We have Ms. Mastel.
Good evening. I just want to start by thanking you all for giving us the chance to just share one of the several great things that we have going on at Frederick Douglass, but something we do have that's new this year that we're really excited about, the impacts we're already seeing from this program on our school is our multi-classroom leaders that we just started this year. It is a district-wide initiative, but we do have some things in place with ours that we feel like make them a little bit unique. So we have a pretty good video I'm going to share with you, so I'm not going to talk a little bit. I just wanted to give you some background. Oh, sorry, I forgot I could control it. Maybe. Got it. So our MCLs are called multi-classroom leaders. They are teachers that have proven in the past to be very effective, strong teachers through both performance and results of student progress. They provide guidance and planning to the teachers that they work with. They model effective teaching strategies in their classroom as well as in other classrooms. They ensure that our teaching programs are implemented with fidelity. We have a few new programs, especially in reading this year, that we've implemented across the board that we're expecting all teachers to follow through with. And they have been an integral part of making sure that those are done with consistency across the grade level. They observe classroom teachers and they provide a lot of constructive feedback. And they also provide guidance and model instruction for our RAs, which are our Research Associates. And they are also new with the program. Both of ours were former teaching assistants, so they have a lot of experience in the classroom. But they're kind of like advanced teaching assistants because they receive some additional training that our TAs do not on how to teach certain programs. They do a lot of observing of classroom teachers in order to really hone in on teaching skills. They attend all of our planning meetings with the teachers. And the reason for that is that they are responsible to provide a lot of whole group and small group instruction. Sometimes while the classroom teacher is in the room, other times the multi-classroom leader is leaving the classroom to assist other teachers. So during that time, our RAs are able to step in and kind of take over. And ours are pretty amazing, I must say. They're really knocking it out of the park, so that's amazing for us. So here is just kind of a snapshot of our MCL teams. We have our English team, which is Miss Jules, who's our MCL, and Miss Bogucki, which is her Reach Associate. They support 2nd and 3rd grade English language arts teachers, and they also are teaching English language arts for 2nd and 3rd grade. Our math and Spanish MCL team is Miss Urbina. She's the MCL for our Spanish portion of the day, and her Reach assistant is Miss Castillo. They again are supporting 2nd and 3rd grade, and they're supporting the subjects of math and Spanish language arts. And again, Miss Castillo does have, or I'm sorry, Miss Urbina does have her own classroom where she's also teaching math and Spanish throughout the day. So like I said, this is a district-wide initiative, so MCLs are not just about what we have going on, but again, what I do think sets ours aside is ours are a partial release. A lot of times MCLs are a full release, which means they do not have their own classroom. They're spending their entire day working with other teachers, modeling in other classrooms. Ours are doing both. They are doing all those responsibilities, but they are also carrying the workload and responsibility if they have their own class all day as well. So that's why our REACH associates are so important in our program. We were lucky enough and able to work it out that we got a MCL to support our English and our Spanish language, which to us is crucial. You know, our languages are considered equally as important, and so without that Spanish support in this program, we felt like we weren't really serving our entire school justice. So we love that we were able to make that happen. And ours are supporting multiple grade levels, which again, I do think MCLs and other buildings are supporting, but they're not also teaching multiple grade levels at the same time. Ours are literally teaching 2nd and 3rd grade every day and supporting those grade levels. So it's been a huge task for them to take on, but you know, they're doing a great job. We're working it out, and we're really excited to see the progress already that we're seeing of being able to have these master teachers come in and help support our staff on a daily basis. So I'm going to let Mr. Fannin talk to you a little bit about the video that you are going to see here.
Good evening. I'm Todd Fannin, Assistant Principal at Frederick Douglass, and I would like to first give credit for the video. We have a PE teacher, Mr. Divico, that is working on his administrative degree, and he agreed to help us by getting this video together, so we really appreciate that. What you will be seeing in the video is exactly what Ms. Mastel was explaining, that our teachers not only teach, but they also have to model for their RA who takes over when they leave the room. They model for the teachers that they're working with. And there's also co-teaching that occurs where they're working directly with their RA in their own classroom, back and forth co-teaching, as well as the teachers that they're working with outside their classroom they will co-teach with. The last part of the video that you will see is how the planning is organized, because as Ms. Mastel pointed out, we're not only talking about MCLs being responsible for their own classrooms, they have multiple grade levels as well as multiple teachers that they're going out and assisting each day. So at this time, we will start our video.
Hi, my name is Mrs. Jules, and I am one of the partial release at MCLs at Frederick Douglass Elementary School, and I serve as 2nd and 3rd grade ELA teachers.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Jennifer Urbina y yo soy una de las maestras que imparte a múltiples grados, y ella es la maestra Jules, que imparte segundo y tercer grado a la vez.
One of our duties as partial MCLs is to support our RAs, Ms. B and Ms. Castillo, by co-teaching with them and modeling with them so that when we leave our classrooms to support other teachers, they're ready to take over.
Nuestro trabajo siendo maestras de multigrados es apoyar a las maestras que nos apoyan dentro del salón para que ellas estén preparadas a la vez cuando nosotras salimos a dar apoyo a nuestras maestras, ellas están listas para tomar control sobre nuestra clase.
Additionally, another part of our duties is to meet with our content areas to support in planning, analyzing data, and next steps for students. And we also come together as grade 2nd and 3rd to vertical plan as well.
Como parte de nuestro trabajo también es brindar apoyo en reuniones como grupo, y en esas reuniones nosotras pues damos comunicaciones, y aparte de eso tenemos reuniones solo con nuestro equipo, ya sea en matemáticas, español o inglés y estudios sociales.
This type of job has allowed us to be able to not only reach the students in front of us in our classrooms, but also many students outside by going and supporting other teachers, giving them feedback, allowing them to come and also see us teach. And this is reaching more than just the students that are within the classrooms that we have personally.
Nosotras nos encargamos de ayudar a las maestras cuando estamos fuera del salón, les apoyamos dándoles soporte en su clase, y de esta manera alcanzamos a más niños, no solo a los que nosotras estamos acá.
If you notice that Ms. Urbina is speaking in Spanish, and that is part of our school's overall goal, is to make sure that we are building global leaders. And through this program, not only are teachers getting supported, but also students as well, through English as well as Spanish.
Como ustedes pudieron notar, yo hablo español y Miss Jules habla inglés. Esta es una pequeña demostración de lo que es la meta de nuestra escuela, que es desarrollar niños globales. Alcanzamos en 2 idiomas, español e inglés.
So come along and take a look at some of the things that we do day to day. Bye.
Box. Box. Change b to f, and you have box. Say gain. Gain. Change g to m, and you have main. Say dim. Dim. Change d to j, and you have dim. Say mutt. Mutt. Change m to n, and you have nut. Good job, guys.
All right, guys, go ahead and take out your boards for me, please. With Miss B, you practice sounds. And so now we're going to match the phonemes or sounds that we heard to the letters or graphemes that match those sounds. Today we blended 3 sounds into words. So on your board, I want you to build those 3 sounds under the three sound mark that we use. All right, so the very first word we're going to build is dad. What's the word? Dad. Tap it out. D. Add. D. Go ahead and mark it up. One, two, three. Let me see. Very good. So you should have D. D. Each of these represents a sound. Go ahead and erase. Your next word is pet. What's the word? Pet. Tap it out. Et. Make sure our letters are facing the correct way, because if you have it backwards, it could be a different letter. 1, 2, 3. Let me see.
Regaló para su cumpleaños. Su tía abuela $10 más. Vamos a ver mis testigos. ¿Qué van a hacer ahora?
Entonces, Alex le regalaron ¿cuánto? 10 ¿qué? ¿Manzanas?
$10.
$10, muy bien. Entonces le regalaron $10 para su cumpleaños. Y la tía abuela le regaló ¿qué más? $10 más. ¿Qué se hace?
Pero. Antes de que diga la respuesta, van a platicar con su pareja y van a pensar qué operación. ¿Vamos a sumar o vamos a restar? En silencio. ¿Listos? 1, 2, 3. Vamos.
See, now I want you to write the word Jess. What would we have to change? The beginning sound, right? To a what? We had Jess. Good job, guys.
All right, guys, so the next thing on our agenda is to compare what's happening in ELA in English as well as what's happening in Spanish. So, Ms. Miller, you want to kind of let us know what we're doing so far?
Sure. Right now, our reading goal in English language arts is we're looking at nonfiction text features, primarily for now focusing on bolded words, headings, and picture captions. And then later we'll add in the other nonfiction text features. And we're using those to see why we use them and to help us set a purpose for reading.
Okay. And how about in Spanish? How are we doing in Spanish? Someone they want to share?
We're learning like syllables with letter G, which G in Spanish has 2 sounds.
Okay, so for comprehension this upcoming, so since we're transitioning to nonfiction, you guys can go ahead and do that in Spanish as well. And so there is the chart over there that we have that's similar to Ms. Miller. So if you guys can do something similar to that to kind of show a transition between the two, that'd be great. Do you guys have the same language?
The same one. Were you doing, remember I shared the ES, and this is for the ES, the fucking ES on the first page? There is one if you want to use that one. I don't know, whatever.
We were doing like the asking questions.
I'm just going to go ahead and stop it because it does get a little long and they plan for a while, but I just wanted to share kind of a list snippet of what it looks like in planning and how crucial it is that you can see that our English language arts teachers and our Spanish language arts teachers kind of make sure they're wrapping that instruction together to support both of those languages. And then there's a part about math later, but it's a lot of the same conversation. So, so I didn't want it to get too long, but just one quick thing before I say thank you and see if you guys have any questions. What I loved about this video when I was watching it is if I weren't so familiar with the classrooms and I didn't necessarily know the people and know the dynamics, a lot of times it's hard to even tell who the teacher is and who the teaching assistant is, which is not always a good thing. But in this case, when we really need those RAs to be so strong in instruction, it's nice to be able to watch them teach and know that they can carry on some of those programs to really ensure that the students are getting a solid education all day, every day. So, so that was part of what I loved about this video. But other than that, does anybody have any questions for us or anything else I can clarify?
Mr. Birchall?
If you could have a full release MCL, would you think you better benefit from that from a partial release, or?
I mean, I definitely think there are, of course, advantages and disadvantages to both. The reason I really like the partial release is I feel like you get a lot of buy-in from teachers when you have someone coming into your room who's not a supervisor, who is just a coworker and is, you know, giving you this advice and making suggestions and helping you plan. And I think it's people are a lot more open to receiving that feedback when they know you have to go back to your classroom and do it as well. The other thing that the partial release allows us to do that you don't get with a full release is because they have their own classrooms, they can go into other classrooms and model. But we have the ability to flip that also and send the teachers in to watch their classrooms. So it really gives us an extra kind of path of providing that guidance. So those were the main reasons that I felt like the partial was the better option.
Yeah, totally. I get it. Thanks.
Sure.
From a pedagogical standpoint, that was really awesome to see.
Yeah, thank you.
The teamwork that went into particularly the scenes with the students. But that last scene with the teacher sitting in a circle, how often does that happen, or is that dictated by moving from one lesson to another?
Yeah, so they're generally meeting at least twice a week. Now, our teams are pretty dynamic. We have multi-grade levels. So we have a K team and a 1 team who share some teachers. So those teachers have to plan based on grade level. We also have our Spanish and our English team partners. So we have some different dynamics that go into the way our teams need to meet and who they need to meet with. So Mondays and Thursdays are pretty much generally set planning time that mirror what you saw today. And then there are other days of the week that teachers are kind of allowed to move around and meet with whoever they need to based on what's going on with instruction.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mastel and Mr. Fannin.
Thank you.
Before you sit, normally at this time, in our previous meetings, you would see further down on your agenda an opportunity for the schools also to present their school improvement plan. You'll notice that that is not there this evening, so I will allow Dr. Van Huken to kind of speak to that change.
Yeah, thank you. So we've done that for a couple years, and one of the reasons we've done that is we want principals to come and take ownership of that plan. But inevitably, that means 3 or 4 principals are doing it in February, March, or April, well into the school year. So last year, a comment was made by, I think, at one of our retreats that we consolidate that. So you'll be seeing all of those plans at the December board meeting. Dr. Bruce will be here to present those together. Our principals will be here as well to answer specific questions. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of overarching themes and similar goals that we have in our school improvement plans, many of which you'll see tonight in my presentation on the annual report. So that's how we'll roll with school improvement plans. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Van Huken. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, that moves us to our final recognition this evening. We do have our VSBA Academy Awards that will be presented by Dr. Van Huken.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight we have 3 board members. Thank you very much for participating in the VSBA Academy. As you're all aware, you're required to participate in credentialing units, CEUs, if you will, to maintain your recognition on the board. So tonight I want to recognize Mike Birchenoff for participation, Brian Pierce-Gonzalez, and Erica Trubin. And so I'll hand these certificates to you at the end of the night, but thank you for participating.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right. All right, that does close our recognition for this evening. That moves us to our public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone that signed up that would like to make comment to the board this evening? Okay, is there anyone in the audience that may not have had an opportunity to sign up on the roster but would like to address the board? Okay, hearing none, thank you. Our public comments portion is closed, and that takes us to our consent agenda. This evening on our consent agenda, we have, all right, the approval of consent agenda items, our agenda, minutes, board service resolution for Karen Anderson Holman, our bills, minor policy revisions, major policy revisions, and our facility usage. Anyone want to make a motion? Okay, we have a motion by Vince D. Benedetto, a second by Dr. Pierce Gonzalez. Is there any discussion? All right. All in favor? Is there any opposed? All right, thank you. Our consent agenda item passes this evening. Moves us to our number 5 on our agenda. Action items, we do have 2. Our first one is our carry forward, and we'll have Mr. Miller.
Hi, good evening. Tonight there are 2 action items that I need to bring to you. These will need to occur this evening in order to pass them along to the city to meet their timeline in November. The first item is the carry forward request, which is for $1,638,636. This is for the funding from our FY22 budget. We are still going through our auditing process, but of this amount, roughly half of it is from unexpended funds. The rest is additional revenue and other changes, but just to give you some idea of context. The request for tonight, these funds would then go per the MOU with the City of Winchester, will move into our capital improvement program, which then provides funds for the operations department to do renovations and to fix equipment, purchase buses, etc. I don't know if there are any specific questions. Happy to address those.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Miller? Okay, Dr. Hickman.
Just one reminder to the board that per our new MOU, Ed and I will be presenting this to the City Council. Well, I'm sorry. Ed and I will be presenting the capital improvement plan to the City Council in December after you approve the capital improvement plan in December. Of course, Ed's working on that with our principals and other budget holders at this time. So this money, this carry forward money, would then be used to tackle the capital improvement projects that we have. And you all received a copy of our annual report, and in that annual report, one of the things that's in there is future capital costs, and right now it stands that the current plan already has $60 million worth of capital projects that need to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So this money will be spent to good use very quickly, and Ed's already spent it probably in his head. So.
All right, thank you. All right, this is an action item this evening. Okay, we have a motion by Mr. D. Benedetto. We have a second by, was that Ms. Crawford? Ms. Crawford, is there any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Is there any opposed? All right, thank you. That motion passes, and I think, Mr. Miller, you're up for the second one as well, our budget amendment.
Okay, this particular memo, what this is doing is adjusting the funds in our FY23 budget as opposed to doing the final carryover from our prior year budget. This particular memo is really contained into 3 major sections, which is our new funds, which of this there's a local component that are also affected by state funds. Specifically, our budget for FY23, based on our historical enrollment during COVID, where we had projected our budget on 3,950 students. Enrollment is certainly well above 4,000 at this point. We do have a formula where we estimate what our actual ADM enrollment is, which is average daily membership, which that figure is being compiled now. We feel comfortable raising our revenue stream from the state by an additional 50 students, which would bring us to 4,000 students. That represents get the exact number, $731,506 per the release of the template that was released in June. The second component is a small grant for the state school-based health workforce grant, which was for $28,240. And then we have some donations coming in from the J2 Dave Foundation, the Y Foundation, for $140,000 that is providing a teacher and some pre-K cost for us. Those are the new funds that are local or state-driven. The second piece of the new funds is adjusting our grant funds. When we are looking at our budget and developing the budget, at that time, we sort of have to use last year's figures of what we anticipate the starting budgets to be, and then estimate the carry forward that may go unexpended into the next year. This is the first opportunity to bring those numbers in alignment with where we are actually, and or we believe we will be, as some of the grant, we're still working through some of the grant funds at this point. This total figure will increase the grant budget by $1,406,111. The largest component of that is the funding from essentially the REACH grant, which is mainly carry forward, which is what's providing the funding for the MCL and which was the key piece of the Frederick Douglass presentation tonight. That's mainly carry forward funds from last year that went unexpended that we're spending now in year 2 as opposed to spending in year 1. The balance of the new funds is another item that we discussed in our FY23 budget development, but at the time, because the state didn't finalize their budget until June, it kind of put us in a precarious position of whether they were going to release these funds or approve them. And that was the school construction fund money. It was determined at that time we would just see what happens and then bring it back in the fall if the funding in fact materialized. And that's what the $1,906,545 is specifically for school funds. They give you a 3-year time frame to expend the funds, so they're not requiring you to spend it immediately. So what we're doing is just recognizing that this revenue stream could come into us this year. Then it would allow us to spend if was so determined based off of the capital improvement program and or those functions. Those are the balance of specifically of the new funds. We're also adding on this memo is a transfer of moving $600,000 from the textbook fund over to capital, which is mainly the component that we'd identified to help finalize the expenditures for DCLC. So there's a lot contained within this one memo, but this is the first opportunity, and obviously this will then go into or over to the city in November to deliberate, and is pretty much the setup for the capital improvement program in December. It's a lot of information, a lot of moving parts, but I don't know if there's any specific questions. I'll be happy to address those as well.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Mr. Miller? Okay. Hit the
Is that
little-
on now?
Yep.
The capital improvement, 600,000 transfer, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. What's Peter losing here? I mean, the 600,000, this was money that had already been budgeted for textbooks but we don't need it now, or are we going to be looking to replace that later?
No, the intention is, the funds were located in the textbook funds and had been building up over time. We're still retaining a balance in that funds. We're not moving money from there to, in essence, rob Peter to pay Paul and then put it back. In this case, those expenditures have, we would still leave a balance of $400,000, and there's no intention at this point to replenish another 600 back into it.
How much do we normally keep in that
I'm
fund?
sorry?
How much do we normally keep in the textbook fund? to
It
make
had
sure we
historically been somewhere between 3 and 6, depending on the time frame.
And
Yeah, and if I could explain just a little bit too, over the last, since I've been here anyways, we have not done what's historically called a textbook adoption. So for those of you in the biz or familiar with the business, typically every 6 years you would go through a pretty elaborate process, and it would cycle through math, reading, science, and you would spend the whole year vetting textbook material, and it was a big chunk of change to adopt the math textbooks kindergarten through 12th grade. Well, in the digital age, that's no longer necessary. So this is like a war chest that was built up over time that, quite frankly, has been elevated and just sitting there, and we don't use it in that way anymore. We still get operating textbook money from the state of Virginia, and we have our local money that we put towards textbooks, and that's been enough. So we've been monitoring that over the last 3 to 5 years. As many of you know, a lot of our resources are digital now. We have digital subscriptions and things like that. So it's not that we don't ever buy a textbook. It's just not as big of a deal, and so this is an opportunity for us to deplete that account and make it back and put it back into normal space. I do not foresee us doing a K-12 textbook adoption in my lifetime.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Miller? Remember, this is an action item this evening. Yes, Ms. Rubin?
Sorry, I'll try to look at you, but it kind of hurts my eyes to turn that. I have 2 questions. Just starting with the capital improvements fund increase of the 1.9 million. Between that and our 1.6 million carryover, that's on par with what it's been the last few years, but much higher than what we used to target. But I understand our budget has increased as well. I know you said you'll be presenting some to council, but do we have some kind of quick talking points on where that $3.5 million is planning to go?
Per the capital, the specific language for, and this is just a small component of the paragraph that they provided to try to provide that for you. Specifically, the state money for the construction fund itself is for non-reoccurring in nature and may include school construction, additions, infrastructure, renovation, modernization of classroom equipment, and then specifically, they give you FY '23, '24, and '25 to expend it as you determine how you need to do so. So they're not, unlike the CARES money and the funding that has come from the federal streams, there's a clock that's ticking and you must spend in a given timeline. So one of the other, I think, was included some debt service you could pay off. There were some other items in that category that provided that. I know specifically Ed could, address a lion's share of those. In the resolution for the capital, he's mainly pointing it to the items that are inside the CIP, mechanical systems, the upgrade bus replacements, and the facilities. And did we?
What are we talking about? Are we talking about the 1.9?
Pardon me?
Are we talking about the construction funds from the state?
All of it
But in combination with.
So what are the plans for? Is that kind of like your?
Well, I was just wondering if we had some quick bullet points on it. I mean, it's $3.5 million, so I would want to know, and we'd be asked, of course.
Off the top of my head, one of the things that we're waiting on, we're working on the HVAC bid for Frederick Douglass that we're going to use CARES money for. But at the same time, as part of that process, we've asked them to, because all the ceiling tiles will be torn out, and it'll be really easy to change out lighting in that building. And that building is like 35 years old.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Madam Chair, if I may, I had one other question. On the first one listed here where we're increasing the ADM by 50, I noticed it said funds will reinstate travel and after-school programming, purchase buses, and salary initiatives cut during the fiscal year 23 budget process. So is that saying we're not going to revisit what we cut? I guess I would have maybe anticipated we'd have a discussion of, hey, we have another $700,000 we weren't anticipating. Things are different since we approved the budget in March and April. Maybe not wildly different, but I think it would be maybe helpful if it's not a ton of work to bring those prioritized items back to the board so that we could vet them again, maybe in current context but if that's going to slow down things, I understand that as well, but I would certainly like to have that opportunity again because there were so many things that we had to cut, unfortunately, and it would be nice to be a little bit more tactical as a board about where we reinvest those additional funds. But that's just my opinion. I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
No. And I think the intention was we would anticipate that to occur. I don't think that we were trying to provide what these potentially could be used for. It's simply in order to, because September 30th is when our ADM, this is the first opportunity for us to declare new revenue. Again, unlike through COVID, where we've been very concerned about our revenue stream and our drop in enrollment, it's finally nice to see, oh, well, enrollment's coming back. We would rather at least go ahead and declare the revenue and get it in the system while we can use it in this fiscal year. Unlike part of the problem with everything else is you've got it and you've not been able to either A, expend it, or you determine that you get the money so late in the year that you really can't spend it. So this is an attempt now to go ahead and get ahead of it so that we can, in fact, spend. So that's the big change and a very nice change, quite honestly.
So in considering Mrs. Trubin's comment, would it be prudent then for the language to change in this memo in terms of where it says funds will reinstate travel? Should we change that since we're not sure exactly, if, upon further discussion with the board, if those are the priorities that we want to kind of put that money towards? May. Yeah, I think it, absolutely. If we're going to revisit them, then it may not be these that are stated here on the memo. So I think it, just my suggestion is that we put may instead of will. Is everyone in agreement with that, or another suggestion? Yeah. That means that we can still vote on this tonight, but we do have an option in terms of if the funds are not necessarily allocated in these specific areas that are noted here. Okay. Madam Clerk, is there something that we need to do to kind of fix that before we vote? I'm sorry? Okay. Well, not the motion per se, but just the memo that was presented under the new fund, school operating fund, and where it says funds will reinstate. We want to change that language to may, because in terms of the point that Ms. Trubin had, after reviewing and kind of relooking some of those areas that we had to cut in our budget, it may come up in terms of the board decides that they want to allocate those funds in a place that's different from what's allocated or noted here on this memo. Okay. Okay.
You're just going to make a motion as revised.
As revised. Yeah. All right. So whoever's making that motion, just. All right. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Miller, thank you. That's good. Again, this is
I was just saying Vince was finally here to help us with these motions that we've really missed him for over the past
right.
years.
All right. So this is obviously an action item this evening.
So how do we want to change it? Do we want to just strike the word, wherever the word will comes out and say may?
Yes, we are going to do, yes, that's part of the actual memorandum, but in terms of,
Well, I'm looking at be it resolved, the Winchester City School Board requests the following budget amendments. If the motion is to adopt that, do we want to change will to may, or which gives us discretion, or do they have to?
think just on the first one
just
is
on
what we were suggesting.
Yeah.
On the first one?
Yeah, because
On
some
the
of the
first
other
one.
ones, I don't think we have a choice.
Right,
Okay.
so just the first.
So, the first one, on the state funds increase at the 731?
Mm-hmm.
Just gonna change it? All right, I want you to take that for motion.
Yep.
I'll move the adoption of the resolution with the change of the wording under the, in the paragraph concerning the increase in enrollment, substituting the word may for the word will.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Di Benedetto. And a second by Ms. Trubin. Is there any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Is there any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And now that moves us to our last part of our agenda this evening, reports and presentation. At this time, we do have our annual report review by Dr. Van Heekelen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, I get to talk to you like 2 or 3 times a year, so this is one of them. So first, I want to orient you to say thank you to Maggie, our PIO, for putting together our first publicized annual report. You'll be seeing this every year around this time, capturing some of the stories and whatnot related to the work of our teachers in our school division with students over the last year. So Maggie, great job on this. This is now on our website. We'll push it out to families via social media, et cetera, but this is some of the soft stuff. Tonight, I also want to say thank you to our principals. Of course, they don't attend every board meeting, but I thought it was important that they were here as we together and collectively own the data that came out of the last school year and really analyze that data and look forward to what does it say? What does it say about the work of our schools, the work of our teachers, the outcomes of our students, and then where we might be going from here. And after my presentation, you're going to be fortunate enough to hear from Jamie Woodall, who will give an in-depth presentation on the new Virginia Literacy Act, which is changing the way that we teach reading in public schools and schools across the country. And you saw a little bit of that in the video from Frederick Douglass Elementary School. So you'll get an in-depth review of that after my presentation. The challenge with analyzing any amount of data from schools is that schools are, quite frankly, really messy, right? And so we like to believe that everything is apples to apples and that you can compare school A to school B to school C, but we know that that's not true. And so our challenge here tonight in Winchester is to look at the data and assess how did we do last year? And how well are we doing comparatively to others, and what do we have to be really proud of and pat ourselves on the back, and where do we say, you know, we need to do a better job? And we want to be sober-minded about that, we want to be analytical, and we want to be truthful and transparent with our community. So as you know, I like to start with our demographics and who we are, and so we'll ground us in some of the big numbers that I really kind of capture our student body. So we are fortunate to serve over 4,200 pre-K through 12th grade students. 24.4%, almost a quarter of our students are English language learners. 77% are eligible for free or reduced meals, and 14.5% of them are eligible for special education services. So those are some big contexts of who we are as a school division. And I took some time with this one just to take a peek back historically and to see where we've been, and this goes back to the 2010-2011 school year, to capture how we've changed as a community and as a school division over the last 7 years. And so certainly we've changed demographically over the last 7 years, and I really want to point your eyes to the increase in our English learners from almost 16.5% 7 years ago to today, which were 24%. 1 out of every 4 children in the Winchester Public Schools is learning to speak English as their second language. Their native language may be Spanish or another language, and as you'll see in the annual report, we usually default to Spanish as that second language, but lo and behold, there are 26 other languages spoken in the Winchester Public Schools, and so that is increasingly more and more diverse. And of course, you're fully aware of our Afghani refugees. Many of them come with two other languages, etc. And then our economically disadvantaged numbers have increased dramatically over the 7 years. So going from 53% all the way up to 77%. That's a 24% increase in economically disadvantaged students over the last 7 years. I'm going to dive into that a little bit more here in the next slide. And we've increased in enrollment. So despite the COVID decline over the last 2 years where we did lose or didn't have a number of students, close to 150 students, they're starting to come back. And if you look historically, we're still at a high point in enrollment. I will say that if you look at our capital improvement plan, we still have space for approximately 500 students, so we are not busting at the seams. While we have, I'm really excited about this enrollment from a financial standpoint. Being able to add some of that ADM revenue to our budget is really helpful. We still could add some more students. I was able to speak to the Planning Commission last week on that. Of course, they're in the midst of their housing conversations across the board. And then, of course, our preschool has increased. Of course, in 2010, we didn't have the robust preschool that we have now. Our preschool numbers are now, and this includes NREP, okay, so we typically have 20 to 30 students at the collaborative school that we share with Clark County and Frederick County for students with disabilities. But today, we have 197 preschool students. That includes our Spanish immersion preschool at Frederick Douglass Elementary School, our VPI, and our NREP students. So that's a big increase in preschool students over the last 7 years. So then the next thing we want to do is think about comparative districts, because in the school business, there's only one way to really determine how successful you are, whether you've done a good job, right? And that's to know, how do I compare my numbers to either the average or to the whole or to individuals? And because of these what some would call at-risk factors, typically poverty and English language learners in test scores, we need to compare ourselves to other school divisions that are similar to the Winchester Public Schools. It's not appropriate for us to compare the data from Winchester Public Schools to, let's say, Clark County Public Schools, right? And here you can see why. So when we look at what we call affinity groups or benchmarking cities in this Commonwealth of Virginia, we poll Harrisonburg, Manassas Park, Manassas City, Roanoke, Lynchburg, and Charlottesville. You could also poll Alexandria. We're very comparable with Alexandria City as well. And so we grab those districts because for two primary reasons. One is their ELL population, the number of percentage of English language learners, but also their free and reduced lunch population, their poverty index. But then inevitably, we're always going to be compared to Frederick County Public Schools and Clark County Public Schools because they're local, right? And so that's a natural thing too. So we want to compare there as well. The EL rank has not changed over the last 3 or 4 years. We continue to be the 5th highest percentage of ELL students in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Manassas Park and Harrisonburg and Manassas City right there, right ahead of us. And then Roanoke and Lynchburg we grab because A, they're cities and they have high free and reduced lunch, but they do not have the same level of English language learners that we have, okay? One of the, so that's your demographics with EL rank. And certainly when we look at unadjusted scores here in a moment, that is including every student that took the SOL, not just your recovery students or your growth students. One of the challenges with the pandemic with economically disadvantaged statistics is we no longer collect free and reduced lunch forms, okay? So now I'm going to have to educate you a little bit on how this number is derived. It's called direct certification. So what we do have still, and we will continue to have, is what's called direct certification with social services. So we know, and this is all public data, what % of students are directly certified with social services, which means they're actively involved with the Winchester Social Services. They're receiving SNAP benefits, they're receiving food stamps, TANF, et cetera. They're involved in some way. We know who those students are. We receive a list from them, from social services every month that gets coded into PowerSchool, and that for us is about 48%. Okay, so 48% of our kids are directly certified from social services, and you can see that number across the board. Because we no longer collect free and reduced lunch applications, that leaves out a chunk of students in that economically disadvantaged category. Typically, it leaves out what you may call the working poor, people who have steady jobs, they're making income above the national average or the threshold for federal income, but they would qualify for free lunch, but they may not qualify for food stamps, okay? So you do have a small, and particularly your reduced meals, that's 160% the threshold. So there's a group of families that would be captured in free and reduced lunch applications that are not captured in direct certification, okay? But because we have free lunch for everybody, it doesn't matter for those particular families, right? Because everybody gets free lunch. It matters for the statistics and how we know what is our level of free and reduced lunch, okay? The other group that's typically not captured in your direct certification would be undocumented families, all right? Families that can't access or don't have access to social services or don't want to access social services for a number of reasons, cultural reasons, you know, just wanting to stay under the radar, et cetera. And so you'll see that the cities that have high immigrant populations, Harrisonburg, Winchester, Manassas Park, Manassas City, their direct certifications are surprisingly lower than, let's say, Lynchburg and Roanoke, which don't have that high of an immigrant population. So that's all context for the economically disadvantaged number. Now, statistically, nationally, when we're a CEP district, a community eligible provision district, and everyone gets free lunch, we use a ratio of 1.6. And so to estimate your free and reduced lunch population, you multiply your direct certification by 1.6. And that's what we use for our Title I application. That's what we use for grants as an estimate or a placeholder for what is the estimated free and reduced lunch population within the city, okay? So that's different because, you know, prior to the pandemic, we were collecting free and reduced lunch applications from every single family, all right? So that explains the number. 77% is eye-popping. I do believe that is accurate. I remember, and you'll remember this too, prior to CEP, when we would look at our free lunch population from kindergarten through 12th grade, our elementary schools were always in the 80s. Our middle school was a little lower, and our high school was always a lot lower. So when we required that application process, the older the students got, many times they did not fill out that application even though they would have qualified. So we weren't really capturing the true number of free and reduced lunch students in Winchester. So it is an estimate, but it is apples to apples when you put it across the board in comparing all of the school districts in Virginia, all right? Any questions on that before I get into the data?
You're saying free and reduced is just mathematical.
Correct, yep.
Once you get up to apparently 62%
Yeah.
certification, you're automatically 100%.
Exactly, yeah, yeah. There are 19 school divisions in Virginia that are, when you do the math calculations, are at 100% free lunch. They're all above that 62%. Yeah. Any other questions on that? All right. So let's see how we did. First thing we want to look at, of course, is our accreditation. You've seen this graph before, this table before. We try to put a lot of data in one slide, and this shows the accreditation of all 7 of our schools. On the left-hand column there, you see the target number for each of the areas. So English needs to be greater than 75%, math needs to be greater than 70%, and you have your gap areas. Your gap areas are broken down by race, broken down by economically disadvantaged, ELL, students with disabilities, et cetera. And so within those gap areas, you have to maintain those target rates. So you can see where our strengths are. Of course, across the board, we're all green in the overall English and math. However, in the gap areas, this is where our work is really important. And you'll notice in our school improvement plans, this is where the focus of our schools are. So let me unpack that a little bit. For Frederick Douglass, you have, while they are all green across the board, congratulations to Frederick Douglass. I think that's the second year in a row. 2019, they were also all green. They need to pay attention right here to their black students in English. They were below the threshold for last year, but their cumulative 3-year average carried them, so that's why they were all green. Similarly, with chronic absenteeism, while certainly they were green, it was their cumulative 3-year average that carried them because the target is 15%. So you can use that same logic across the board with all of our schools. Corals Elementary School is focusing in their gap areas with English and math, with their same group of students, their African American students and their students with disabilities. You see right here is for English, this is their performance last year, and this is their performance last year for math. And so they need to get those numbers up to greater than 70% or 75% in order to be in the green. Congratulations to John Kerr as well. They were all green last year. In 2019, you'll remember they had 2 yellows. So I remember talking with Beth after that year, and she was, nervous. And I will say this, for those who say that our accreditation system isn't rigorous enough, if you were to sit and talk to our principals, they would tell you it's pretty rigorous. They worry about this. They don't kind of call it in and just kick their feet up and say, I'm not worried about our accreditation system. I'm not worried about the accountability with the accreditation system. Even the schools that are all green, they know, especially in Winchester, you're a step away from dropping into yellow, okay? And so our folks are dialed in and fully aware of what this all means. Virginia Avenue is focused on English. You can see their primary focus is students with disabilities. Chronic absenteeism is an issue for 4 of our 3 schools. It was an issue for everybody last year, but 3 of our schools had a 3-year average that allowed them to get green. The intermediate school has some work to do in 3 areas: English gaps, math gaps, and chronic absenteeism. And then Daniel Morgan Middle School is our one school that's accredited with conditions, and they continue to have a low rating in English gaps with our Black students, our economically disadvantaged, multiracial, and special education, all right? And I did want to just kind of give some context to that. So just so you understand what that actually means, when I pull Daniel Morgan's report and do some quick math, they would need 20 additional African American students in 7th and 8th grade to pass the English SOL in order to get to a green, okay? So that gives you a sense of how many. They had 125 total African American students that took that SOL test. For economic disadvantage, they'd need 24 students. For multiracial, they would need 4 students. For students with disabilities, they'd need 28 more students to get to that green level. Now, they do have an opportunity with what's called a reduction of 10%. If they reduce the failure rate by 10%, that gives them a win. You'll see one of those on the Hanley scorecard here under English. So that's another way that they can get to green with their accreditation, okay? And then the last one is Hanley High School. They fell to red with their math scores, and you can see the areas of concern there, all in the 60s, I believe, and I think special education was in the 50s. I did some quick math for Susan with math, and she would need 5 African American students to pass the math test to get up there, 15 economically disadvantaged, 3 multiracial, and 12 students with disabilities to make it into that green category, okay? Chronic absenteeism is a big concern at Hanley. Last year, of course, we need to remind ourselves that we were in the middle of a pandemic, and so this didn't happen in a vacuum. And there was a lot of quarantining going on, a lot of students that were not coming to school for a number of reasons, and quite frankly, with chronic absenteeism in particular, we developed some habits of, we can just kind of stay home. It's kind of a default mechanism, and so the intensity that you're seeing from our school administrators to get kids to school and our social workers and counselors is a direct result of this data saying, hey, we got to get back to normal. We've got to get back to a norm of going to school and making that a priority. So I'm going to pause there and see if you have any questions on accreditation.
Okay. I'll start down here, Mr. Wallace. Questions? Okay, one second. Okay. Vince, you're good.
I guess, since I wasn't, oh gosh, I just lost my screen. I'll get it right back. Since I wasn't here for the last couple of years, we lost a couple of years. They were waived. VD 08 has done this accreditation. Did they change the numbers at all for what you had to, I mean, the numbers that we're looking at are the same ones from 3 years ago. You had
Correct.
to have the same standards.
Yeah, same standards. What they did do is for your 3-year average, they did not include 1920 or 2021. So that data, of course, we didn't even test in 1920. So.
Yeah. So these numbers here are 3-year numbers or just 1-year numbers?
Where it says current year, that's last year. Where it says cumulative 3-year, that's a 3-year average.
Okay. Yeah. Does this indicate that we really haven't lost that much over those last 2 years, or I mean that we've recovered? I hear a lot of stuff about all the stuff that's been recovered, but our students seem to be doing well. Are we? Is some of this that above 70% is fine, but at that 30%, are they further behind than they used to be? And that's a big problem that we have to worry about?
We are not recovered, period. I mean, this scorecard is a little bit, from 2019, which is the last time we had a scorecard, this is not as good as 2019. Hanley did not have any red in 2019. There's a mixed bag of yellow and green at the K through 6 level. Daniel Morgan, in 2019, we had 3 all-green schools. Daniel Morgan Intermediate School was all green in 2019. So this is certainly not better, and it is disproportionate to students of color, disproportionate to students in poverty, and disproportionate with our ELL students. You'll see that through the slide that we're not recovered, no. We're making progress, but we have not recovered.
I'm happy to see the green, and especially with the youngers, but when I look at English current year at Hanley 90.12, but math at 72.71, I'm just wondering if that 27.29% that's not doing it are more challenged than in previous years. And so green is nice, but what's behind the green worries me a bit.
And that's a great, thank you, Vince. And the math was a bigger struggle during the pandemic than reading, and that's nationwide. So when kids did not get instruction in math, guess what? Regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of all those demographic indicators, kids didn't do as well in math because, as I think you would agree, like you need explicit instruction in math to do well in math. I don't care who you are unless you're a genius. So all the math numbers are down because of the pandemic, and that's across the state and across the nation.
Thank you.
Shugan?
I think a textbook would also be nice for math. I mean, just
there you go.
Back to our earlier conversation, but that's just me. I just want to clarify, and then I think I have a question on the absenteeism, but are you saying the cumulative 3-year numbers do not include those 2 years that you cited, 1920, 1921?
Correct.
Okay. Has there been any conversation at the state level of changing the chronic absentee benchmark from 15%? And it's particularly when I look at our cumulative 3 years at the elementary level, right? Where, I mean, when is absenteeism an issue in elementary school? Not that I could ever remember on my tenure, not across, a whole school. And you look at the stark differences in that 3-year to where we are now, and nobody's running under 20%. It just feels like, how do we ever meet that benchmark if even our youngest learners aren't coming to school? And to your point, maybe habits have changed. Maybe people are also more conservative about sending their kids to school when they're sick now, which is something we want. So just any broader conversations you've heard to that end?
There is. I think in even broader than that conversation, even today, I believe we will see an entirely revamped accreditation system in, if not the coming years, as early as next year. So as much energy as we're spending unpacking this accreditation system, which I do believe is rigorous and measures the right things, it forces us to look down into the weeds and ask really hard questions. It is complicated. And I haven't even unpacked yet the percentages, because the layperson, unless you wanted to sit with one of our administrators for a couple hours, you're not going to understand the accreditation system in 10 minutes. So there is a desire publicly, I think, to have a more transparent but also understandable accreditation or grading system. And I think that's what we might see in the coming year. So, but they're looking at everything, not just chronic absenteeism. Yep.
I just had a question about looking back up at the red under Daniel Morgan and also Hanley, and you may have said it, I'm sorry if you did and I missed it. Is there any overlap? And the reason why I'm asking that, because you kind of drilled down specifically in terms of a number, in terms of this many students would need to pass this in order for this to go to green. Is there any overlap? In, for instance, if a black student passed that was an ED student as well, if they, like, how does that account in terms of those specific numbers that you kind of mentioned?
Yeah, 100%. There are a lot of double counting. So a student could count in 2, 3, I think up to at least 3 categories. They could have their race count, their whether they have a disability, and whether they're economically disadvantaged. You could throw in ELL too. So you could be Hispanic with a disability, economically disadvantaged, and special ed. So that you could have a student count up to 4 in 4 different categories. So when and if that particular student passed their SOL, that helps 4 different categories. That's right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Continue.
Yeah, so to finalize accreditation, I think it's something that I know our schools are laser focused on. They have written their school improvement plans directly around this, and certainly it's something that we talk about on a regular basis in our instructional meetings. As we move into, the next portion is around graduation rate, dropout rate, and then we're going to get into SOLs, but here I do want to highlight the difference between accreditation percentages and your SOL unadjusted percentages, and because you're going to ask that question as soon as I get to that slide. These accreditation percentages don't include a number of things. One, they include a outright pass. So if I pass the SOL, I count as a percent pass, right? But I also count if I grow. If I grew from my beginning of year assessment to my end of year assessment, that counts as a pass. I also count if I recover a pass from a previous year. I also count if I improve on my WIDA score, which is an English language learner test that we give across the state. So there's a number of ways that these percentages are somewhat inflated because of different caveats in how we count proficiency. And in the public sphere and even in the policy sphere, that's some of the criticism of our accreditation system. For us to say, Frederick Douglass has 92% proficiency in English, but in slide 7, I'm going to show you it's really only 60%, right? So the difference between what we say in accreditation versus the unadjusted score that's reported out on the school quality profile website, okay? So I did want to explain that, and then when we get there, I'll highlight that again, okay? All right, let's move into graduation rates and dropout rates. This is disappointing. There's no way around it. We had a very disappointing graduation rate and dropout rate. Now, this was so disappointing that I dug into every single story. I wanted to know who are we talking about and why. And that made me feel better. It also made me feel better when I looked at all the other divisions like us. So, okay, how did we do compared to Harrisonburg? How did we do compared to Charlottesville? How did we do compared to Manassas? That made me feel better. But getting to 87% graduation rate last year is not where Winchester has been in the last 6 years. It was something that when we saw that number come across and we kind of knew we were trending that direction, we were all very disappointed. And so, as you know, we have 2 different ways to calculate graduation in Virginia. One's called a completion index. They're very similar, but this gives you some extra points for GED and some certificates of completion. Sometimes your GCI is a little bit higher than your graduation rate, like maybe a point or 2. This year it was the same. So it's 87, and our 4-year graduation rate is 87 as well. But here you can see over time, this is not what we're used to, right? Even a year before, we were at 91%. And so 87% is not something that we're excited about. But then you always have to look at comparative data. You can't just grab that number, compare it to the state, and say, yes, we did a good job, or yes, we did a bad job. If we were in a affluent district, I would pick affluent districts to compare against, right? But we're not. And so when you look across the board, did we outperform Harrisonburg? Yes. Did we outperform Manassas? Yes. Manassas Park beat us a little bit by a point or a point and a half, almost 2 points. Roanoke, Lynchburg, Charlottesville, they cleaned our clock, okay, when it comes to graduation rate. Frederick, Clark, and Warren are there for as local comparisons. And then you can see how we did in the different subgroups compared to our peers. Overall, we did pretty good, but with our African American students, not so much. Our multiracial students, special education, this was a huge drop. We had 12 students with a disability drop out of school, guys. And so that was disheartening to say the least. So that is our on-time graduation rate. When you look at it in graph form, you know, you can see how we fare. We're in the middle of the pack with other cities like us, with some outperforming us and some underperforming us. Then you get into the dropout rate. Some people ask, why aren't those two numbers comparable or compatible? You would think if we had 87% graduate on time, then how many would drop out? 13% dropped out. But we have a number of students who are still with us, even though they didn't graduate in 4 years. They may graduate next semester. They may graduate in their year 5, and many of them are students with disabilities who stay with us till they're 20, sometimes even 21. So our dropout rate ballooned, skyrocketed from 6.9% to 11.7%, and the gap areas are not pretty at all when you look at how our students did across the board in those different subgroups. Okay? Again, so then I have to ask the question, well, who are these kids, right? So poor April, she had to endure like 17,000 texts from me and Susan. What about this? And what about that kid? And what about this? And so we got deep into the data, and here's what we know. Again, so what's the story behind the students who dropped out of school? We had 34 kids that dropped out of school. Okay, who are they? 21 of them were Hispanic, 7 were white, 4 black, 2 multiracial. But here's where it really you get to know who they are in relation to the work of our people, right, in Winchester Public Schools. 19 of them were not with us from kindergarten through 8th grade. They were not in Winchester from kindergarten through 8th grade. They enrolled in Winchester in 9th grade. Okay, so they're brand new to Winchester in 9th grade, which means by definition they had less than 5 credits. Okay, now just because you're enrolled in 9th grade with 3 credits doesn't mean you're 14, right? Because the next bullet will tell you of the 34 students who dropped out of school, 14 of them enrolled in 9th grade, and 14 of them were 17 years old or older in 2018. Okay, so think about that student for just a moment. Remember who they are. You're 17, maybe 18 years old. You are required to go to school till you're 18. You are moved to Winchester for whatever reason. You're enrolled as a freshman with less than 5 credits. You got to get 21 credits to graduate. That's going to take you at least 3 years. Some of these students would be 20, 21 years old before they could actually graduate, assuming they passed everything, right? And then in the middle of that, you have a pandemic. So 2 of their years, they're going to school maybe virtually 100% or in a hybrid schedule, right? And quite frankly, the individual stories we know, many of them went to work. They were 18 years old, they went to work. And so they were in the pandemic. There were plenty of jobs to be had during the pandemic. And they went to work, and many of them were boys, okay? And so when I peel back the story, can I sleep at night? Would I sit in a coffee shop with one of these young men at 18 years old and maybe say the same thing? Maybe I would, right? You don't know all the context to their story. And so for those same 14 students, their dropout date is the first day of school last year. They didn't come back to school last year. So they were virtual during the pandemic, and they just never came back. And so that peels back a little bit of the story behind our dropout rate this year. Are we disappointed? Absolutely. Do we take responsibility? 100%. You got to put it in context and have a real conversation about it. And it's not just a headline. These are real kids involved here. So I'll stop there. I got a little passionate about our dropout rate, especially when I got into the individual stories. Any questions? The challenge, of course, is tomorrow's newspaper, right? Because this will be front page, potentially. And how do we navigate that as a community? And what I hope doesn't happen is that we look inward and blame our teachers, our staff, et cetera. Certainly we have work to do, but there's a story behind the dropout rate that is really important to be told. All right. Okay, some other data that's good data. CTE data increased. We're getting better at giving industry credentials, what we call CTE completers. CTE completers mean they've majored in something, have taken multiple courses within that particular area. So I won't spend too much time on there. And this is where we get to this juxtaposition between accreditation and unadjusted scores. And in the coming months, you're going to hear, and even weeks, you're going to hear a lot about unadjusted test scores and whether that tells the whole story. And so here's where you see that difference. So we'll pick on Frederick Douglass for a moment. In reading, you saw earlier they were 92% proficient in their accreditation rating. But when you strip out all the growth and you strip out all of the recovery scores and the WIDA scores, et cetera, the true raw proficiency is 64%, okay? And these are our scores across the board. And we're typically in the mid-60s, lower 60s, upper 50s across the board there. And I think, too, it's important to remember that when you strip out some of those safety nets are intended to recognize and honor the differences in our school divisions across the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so they allow school divisions with high ELL populations and high poverty rates to demonstrate growth and say, hey, what is the true work of schools, not just how are the students doing on a standardized test, okay? So let's look at that across the board for Winchester. And again, this is where you can start to see some celebrations and wins. Everything in this business is comparative. It's all about how well we do compared to others because they all took the same test. And so in our affinity group, you'll see we outperform our affinity group in reading pretty well. Charlottesville had us by a point. And then in the subgroups, we do pretty well in our affinity group. Reading is our weakest subject, as you can imagine, with a high ELL population. As soon as we get to math, you're going to see a lot more green. Manassas had a strong year in math, so we might be calling them. I'm sorry, this is writing. Sorry, we had a strong year. We had a strong year in writing too. In fact, we were above the state average in multiple categories in writing, which is really, really good for us. Okay. Then we get to math. We had a strong data in math. Again, it's comparative. So how did we do compared to everybody else? We outperformed our entire affinity group there. Science, the same thing. We outperformed our affinity group in science. And we also outperformed the affinity group in history. And in history, we were at the state average with our black students and our white students, which is great. And then the last thing, looking at it from a trend over time, this is the distance between Winchester and the state average. Now, we are not representative of the state. The state's free and reduced lunch population is 44%. You know what ours is, so it is not an equal representation, but it is a benchmark to think about. We have gained on the state average over the last 6-7 years. In that right-hand column, you can see our percent gain on the state average. So reading, we've gained quite a bit. Math, writing, we've gained. Math, we have a mixed bag there. Science, some strong data there. And history, strong data there. All right. So that's the SOL story. That's it. Any questions for me?
I think we're all processing. Okay.
Yeah, we've had months to
Yep.
process this data. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Mahito.
Great.
Okay, that moves us, we're still on item 6 here. That moves us to our reading report. Mr. Bula.
Good evening, everyone. Like I mentioned last week at our retreat, the Virginia Literacy Act, and what I'm excited about is we've been ahead of the game, thanks to Jamie Woodall and her work with our schools. So she's going to present to you tonight the work that she's been working on, leading our teachers and our administrators, and then also kind of comparing it to what we're looking forward to with the Literacy Act that's happening, and just how we've been ahead of the game in supporting our teachers with professional development and support, and all thanks to Jamie. So she's going to present to you this evening.
I couldn't not make it interactive. I'm Jamie Woodall, and I'm really thankful to get the chance to share some of the hard work we're doing. As Jake was talking about, the Virginia Literacy Act passed back in April of 22. And through that act from 2022 in April, Virginia's taking the lead nationwide to improve early literacy outcomes for our youngest learners. There are other states across the nation that have gone through this process, and it has been challenging, to say the least, and some of the other places that kind of took the reins early on, and we learned from them here in Virginia. And I'm really proud at the direction that the act took and that it passed. I geeked out a little bit. I was home with a sick kid the day that it passed, and I was weepy in my kitchen. It's really watching the YouTube live. So I'm excited for our kids. I'm excited for our teachers, and I'm really just excited about public ed. And I think Virginia is the place to watch over the next couple of years with literacy instruction. To ground us in this work, it's really nice to be able to say very clearly that our Empower 2025 is very much in line with the Virginia Literacy Act and vice versa. The three biggest components that I've been working really closely on are the three. The learner empowerment, just to ensure competency of essential knowledge. It's one thing to say, we really want to get into rich projects and create lifelong learners, but what does that really mean for our youngest students? How can we begin to provide them with the essential knowledge that they need and information to be able to attack the code of literacy from age 5 or before? We also have been providing tons of opportunities for both individual and collective professional development. The very worst thing to try to do is shift something with a group of educators that you do not give the chance to delve in before it's mandatory. So over the last couple years, we've offered a number of professional development opportunities that really helped sitting in this uncomfortable shift a lot more engaging for folks, and they ask the best probing questions. We have the best teachers. And then just developing that community school partnership is huge too. So what does the act actually say? It does not go into effect until school year 24-25, and there are several pieces to this, one of which is not mentioned in the slides, and I do want to start with that, is the act included higher ed, in that they are looking at educational programs across the Commonwealth and trying to make sure that teachers come equipped with the essential knowledge they need to teach early literacy, which I think some of our folks have felt robbed of that opportunity, and they're still paying student loans, and they think, I should already know this stuff. Why don't I know this? And so I really value the fact that the act included those folks as well. So every student in kindergarten through 3rd grade will receive core literacy instruction based on scientifically based reading research and evidence-based literacy instruction as defined in the act. The biggest thing with this is we need to make sure that we're getting really good at our craft and including all the components for almost like a balanced diet, the food pyramid, it's the same thing for literacy. And then also making sure that if we are providing those opportunities for all students, are we also pairing that with interventions that are just in time and targeted enough to make a difference for kids? So what are we doing? They're saying we have to do this by 24-25, but already In grades K to 3, they are already receiving core literacy instruction based on the science of reading. And 3 of the biggest helpers in that, teachers teach students, programs don't teach students. But when you have a disconnect between the materials that teachers are provided and the professional development that you're giving them, when those don't match, it's a perfect storm. So we were able to equip our teachers with these 3 resources that have really helped push core instruction to the next level for our K through 3 students. But until we get really, really good at core instruction and really make sure that that diet is balanced, it's really hard to determine, is it a gap in instructional experiences for kids, or is it very much a striving reader that just needs a little more? So is it that they need they need more than what core instruction is providing them, or is it really they just didn't have quite the balanced diet we were looking for? So we're trying to determine between those 2 right now. So how are we doing that? The reading rope is something that it doesn't matter if you are in a professional development for our English language teachers, if you're in a professional development with me, or even with Kristen, the crazy math lady. We seem to always connect it back to the reading rope. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Scarborough's reading rope, it basically is that model of a literacy diet. So what is it that goes into skilled reading? When is the appropriate time to include each of these components and how much in a student's school day? And really that 0 to 5 is where the magic happens. And so that is why community partnerships are so important, because a lot of that happens on the laps of their parents or caregivers. But on the right-hand side there, that's an example, just a one-pager that everybody has, and it's really cool because in 2 of our 4 elementary schools, this same process is happening twice a day, once in English and once in Spanish, because teachers and students have superpowers here in Winchester. But this just gives a short outline of what daily instruction might look like, and really does look like in every classroom here in Winchester for core. So you could go across the board and look in a 2nd grade classroom, and you would see these components. They might not all be in the same order, but they're happening throughout the day. Really exciting stuff, especially since, just to piggyback off of the question about the textbooks, we write so much of our own curriculum in Winchester, which is really where the magic happens, because like we were saying, the teacher is the keeper, not the keeper of the knowledge, but that's where the magic comes from, not a textbook, but at the same time, if you're coming together for curriculum work, what's more powerful than saying, I have those magnetic letters, I have access to that read aloud, I have those really cool things that you're going to use in just a minute that I can't wait. We are going to do something that would go along with, down here where it says teacher-led. So after we've done some whole group instruction, one of the shifts that we've made, and I know some of you are probably thinking this already, what shifts is she talking about? What did it look like before these shifts in instructional best practices went mainstream? Well, I'll tell you, when I was the reading specialist at Daniel Morgan Middle School, some of my very favorite students, many of them 8th grade boys, were going to Hanley and had gaps in their foundational literacy. And I thought, if this job ever opens up, I'm going to apply so I can make a difference for kids. And so here I am, and I don't regret it 1 minute, and selfishly for my own kids too. But what did it look like before, and what shifts have we made? So you have 2 books in front of you. The first one's about a robot. I wanted you to take a look at that book. In that robot book, you will notice that it is a repetitive text, okay? It's something that if I was to read it at the small group table and you were to follow along with your finger, after you listened to me read it once and you used your pictures, you could pretty much guess at the words, right? In fact, I don't know how many of you have read with kindergartner over the past couple years, but they can read with their eyes shut. There's even a Dr. Seuss book about that. Well, that obviously is not how we really learn to read. But the issue lies in, if this book is beautiful, it is, it's well done, the illustrations are magical, they're very engaging, but when it gets down to it for early literacy, what do kids really need to be able to do? They have to learn to break the code. They have to have enough experiences with their letter sound knowledge and the books we put in front of them, because how else do you get the application? It's just not there. So the next thing I would like you to do is check out that other book that you have in front of you. That is not a predictable text. That's what they call a decodable reader, or they might call it a controlled text. And what the difference between what I just have shown you and this book is that if I have taught you short vowel A, S, S, and several other letters explicitly, I can then hand a new reader that book, and they have the tools to be able to attack the words on the page while also enjoying the pictures. But if you notice, the pictures don't give away the story. So if I was to ask you to get your magnetic wand out, and you're going to turn your paper over so you have the side with the boxes. So you need your little circles, your wand, and your paper that has the boxes. Okay, we're going to play something called Say It, Build It, Blend It, Zap It. Okay? Have you ever played this at a school board meeting before? No. It's a first. Well, it has to be interactive. So some of the words that show up in that book, most of them are short vowel words, okay? You're thinking as the student. Mrs. Woodall's already taught me the word like. She's already taught me the word to. Now, I'm going to ask you to build some words based off of what you know about letters and sounds. When I say the word, I want you to grab some of your circles, and I want you to add one for every sound you hear in my word. So let's practice one together. Say the word not. Say not. Let's tap it. N-aw-t. Not. Okay, push and say. One sound, one box. Not. Your magnetic letter, or your magnetic things for the zap part. So push and say. So I should see, everybody has how many dots? 3. How many in each box? All right, point and say each of the sounds in not. N, ah, t, not. Now, zap it. Zap it. Zap it. Yes. All right, get ready. Here's your second word. The second word is on. Say on with me. On. All right, let's tap it. On. Build it. Blend it. Zap it. So fun. So these are some of the activities that go along with explicit systematic phonics instruction that then if you opened that book back up, you could then immediately see that if a student was given explicit systematic phonics instruction, particularly just with short vowels for this book, this is a beginning kindergarten book, at least quarter 1, okay? They would be able to immediately apply that and feel successful. The things I'm learning with letters and sounds are directly related to me becoming an independent reader and not someone who memorizes a sentence and then could read the book with their eyes shut. It really empowers kids. It also, I don't know if you've ever met anyone that is an excellent reader and a horrific speller. It's created by word callers from books like the predictable text, like The Robot. So I kind of went off on a tangent, but it was fun, right? Good. Any questions about that before I keep going? Yeah.
You mentioned that this is quarter one kindergarten.
Sure, Whenever they know enough letters and sounds to get started. In the back, it'll show you how many they need to know.
Sounds like you have a ton of experience. So I was just wondering, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, was this a kindergarten book we'd expect kids to read in the first quarter?
It was different because what we were using to decide if they were on level or not were how well they could memorize a text and or had been read to enough by that type of book that they could follow along from the pictures. So it really was not an accurate indication of what they could do. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yeah, you hear so much about how much more we expect of students now, and has the brain developed that much that you have kids coming in kindergarten that can already read on whatever grade level, and now you feel behind if your child can't read and they go to kindergarten. So I was just wondering if, in your experience, we really are, I want to say expecting more. Maybe children were always capable of that all along, and we just didn't know because we didn't have the pedagogy or the research behind it. So just interested in that.
I think the books have gotten a little bit more interesting. I remember reading about Jane, see Jane run, see Dick sleep. I don't know what it was.
Run, Jane,
So
run.
this cat that likes to nap is actually much more interesting than seeing Jane run.
Bread and jam for Francis, remember?
I don't know about that.
You guys don't remember that?
Oh, yeah.
I love Francis. He's a
What?
was he a badger or a raccoon?
Poll the crowd. Bread and jam for Francis.
Francis?
Oh, yeah.
Alice Stewart,
It's
remember?
a great book. Anyway.
But what's also
That's a
different
Philly
is
book, mine.
this, students now, kids now know how to type, and they need to be able to read things on their phones and everything, so they are learning. No, they get their parents' phones on the computers, they get a computer in front, so yeah, they're learning a lot more than they used to. And not all of it good.
But it really does have to be a delicate balance between, you don't want to drill and kill them to death, right? But they do need that essential knowledge in order to take it to the next level. And on that reading rope, teachers are masters of developing the love of literacy in kids. They love to do the read aloud. They love to offer rich literacy experiences. They love to send books home with kids that are, full of more than just a simple beginning, middle, and end, and a not so great story like a Dick and Jane, right? So the misconception about a decodable is that it has to be black and white and not colorful and no real rich story to it. And the truth is we've gotten a lot better with that. Publishers have over the last couple years, so we're not stuck with a different version of the same thing from years past. So very excited about that. If we had continued the lesson, which this is taking a long time, so I won't, but you could have then used those lines there to write out the words that you had pushed and said. And then at the bottom there, we want to make sure, just as we're asking them to read the text and put it all together, we also want them to be able to write sentences and phrases and put it together in their writing too. And so that's what that was for. Third and fourth grade teachers, I try to give them a shout out as much as possible, really third and up. Even prior to the beginning of the pandemic and through the pandemic, they were beginning to see a split. We had kids that were learning to read in spite of some of the skill gaps that they had, and then we had another group of students that were very much high risk from the get-go, meaning they were coming to kindergarten less equipped than they had been in previous years. To give you a reference point, the state of Virginia, there's a benchmark of, it's quite a low benchmark, honestly, for fall PAL scores for beginning literacy. The at-risk category for early literacy for beginning kindergarten in Virginia is about 23% overall. Winchester, our folks sat right at almost 50%. So 47% of our kiddos are coming to us a bit behind, which I hate to even say that because kindergarten is where, you know, it's their first school experience. That's where everybody should start on a level playing field, and unfortunately that's not the case. So we need to make sure we have things in place so we can make every minute count for not only our teachers but our kids. So back to the shout out for 3rd and 4th grade teachers, that gap, if you were to buy a textbook and adopt a textbook, you would be teaching to the middle. I say a lot of times with our population, you would be teaching to about a child or two in your class. It would be not as difficult as it should be or challenging. The rigor wouldn't be there for this half, and it certainly wouldn't even be accessible to this half. And that's something that if you don't just get the best of what's available and piece it together for the group in front of you, we're really missing the mark. But that being said, that gap it gets larger as kids progress through school. So I always like to give 3rd and 4th grade a shout out about that. So that is what we are being asked to do. But through the Act by 2024-25, every family, we need to make sure that they have access to online resources to support literacy development. One way that UVA, particularly the PALS folks, which are a very small group of folks that work extremely hard, they are working to revamp the screener that they use for kids. But when we're talking about family resources, it used to be that you would have to log in to see anything on that site. And what they have done is they have opened that up to really anybody who has the website, access to the website. It gives really short videos in English and Spanish. It has so many things that would be very easily accessible to our families, and we could easily just put that into a newsletter, or when we have family nights, we could show them what the website is and how and what it has to offer. Lots of cool stuff on there. And what are we already doing? I've begun through the reading specialists in each building, showing them exactly what access families do have on the site, and it gets better and better all the time, and I know that many of them plan to share it at conferences, or in the near future. So beginning 24-25, this goes back to the teacher. So they're going to be using that curriculum. They are going to be able to be advocates for kids that I have given this instruction. I've tried it for this long. It's working for 70% of my class, but these students here, they need something more. And not only do they need something more, I know what that something is. And I'm going to advocate that they get that either from me, a different part of the day, or from someone else. And having those open conversations, not only with their teammates, their co-teachers, but also with families, I think will be essential to our success moving forward. And that's really what we're doing now through the screeners until PALS catches up. I keep saying that because they're working really hard, but they have till 24-25. Until that assessment catches up with what research says is best practice for kids, we are supplementing the things we're asking kids to do. We are giving them, I say it's another assessment, but truly it's called the PAST assessment, and it's an assessment you can do with your eyes shut. So just because you came to kindergarten maybe and didn't know a handful of letters, that doesn't mean you don't have a ton to offer someone. So close your eyes really quick. Say pig. Say pig without the p. See, you're manipulating language. You're using the smallest units of sound, your phonemes, and you don't even have to know a single letter. Kids come knowing a lot more than sometimes we give them credit for, and I'm hoping that PALS will begin to show some of that and celebrate that in the future. And in the meantime, we're just going to keep doing our thing and waiting for the rest of the state to catch up, right? One other area that the Literacy Act addresses is the role of a reading specialist. In Winchester, we are so blessed. We have more reading specialists than what the Act says that we have to have. The act said that we had to have, or will have to have, one reading specialist for every 550 elementary school students. Currently, we have 2 at each of our elementary schools, and actually we have 3 at John Kerr. And I've had to shift how and what these folks do on a daily basis, because through the pandemic, we have a large need for intervention, right? But you can't intervene your way out of a core challenge. So if you have gaps in your core instruction, what everybody's getting, it creates the perfect storm for an upside down RTI triangle. So they have really put on a different hat and done a lot more co-teaching, a lot more professional development for folks. They've gone in with 2 feet and rode the wave with me. They are continuing to learn themselves through very intensive professional development that then they will be able to speak to and lead at the building level, so it isn't just always Jamie saying it. And they're doing a great job with that. So it says that they're going to have to do some of these things, and I can proudly say they are well on their way in doing them right now. So collectively as a division, they really want and are asking and are saying that we have to have evidence-based curriculum, check. Staff, enough reading specialists to support intervention needs, check. And we're providing ongoing professional development that is all in line with the science of reading, check. So we're doing a great job. We just have to stay the course. And I won't tell you that at times it hasn't been uncomfortable. I've been saying recently that I just sit in the uncomfortable. When you create an environment where you have lifelong learners, which is teachers, right? And you've provided them ahead of time because you secretly knew this was coming with the information that they needed to be successful. Sometimes it comes with some hiccups and a lot of questions, which I welcome. So I sit in the uncomfortable because if you keep doing the same thing you've always done, you will never get any different results. There's a laundry list of all of the things that we are currently doing and offering for our teachers. One of the things I'm most proud of are, it seems small, but it was yielded big results. This is the first book study that I offered to reading specialists and also at the same time to coaches and administrators. And so many of them took advantage of this text and this time together to just sit in the uncomfortable and ask the questions. That then we created literacy leaders at each one of our buildings, which was really powerful. And I can't thank, many of them are here, so thank you for, sitting with Wild Woodall in the evenings and going through each one of these shifts. I have books if you would like to borrow them, if you would like to be part of the shift as well, I'd love to have you. But with any sort of shift, big or small, but the more folks you have in the fishbowl, the more difficult it is. People will tend to stay with what's familiar. Even if it's not working, it can be scary to jump into something that you're unfamiliar with, especially if you are still paying student loans for an education that should have prepared you for something like this. And then I'm coming along and saying, I need you to shift your thinking. But Jamie, my check, or they still want me to write a check every month, and I'm frustrated, right? But this is a learning curve for everybody. If anyone tells you they have it all figured out, they would be lying. But we'll sit in the uncomfortable together, and I cannot wait to see what happens with kids. A small pocket of this, they jumped in full throttle. They were the fish that were already jumping. They were just, whatever, we'll try it. We went from 27% at risk beginning of kindergarten. That group went down to 8% by the spring last year. So that's just a small picture of what can be and what will be for our kids. And I just, thanks for playing along. That's it. Do you have any questions?
My one question was the 24, 25. There's certain things we're not going to enact until that time. Is that what you mean? It's some things that are not going to.
So there are a couple things. One, although we're offering professional development locally, the state's going to be offering a bunch more a bunch more of the same things, but clustered so we can learn from other divisions, and that will start in 24-25. We do not have to have a WPS literacy plan posted on the website until 24-25. So it's things that are in the works like that. But overall, the biggest shift for us really just happened this fall over the last couple weeks with, why did I get another box delivered of goodies? Another box, uh-oh, how do I put all this together? So the instructional components, the resources are already here with us, and we're using them. If
So
that makes
are we
sense.
already using the platforms Lexia and the Leaf?
Yes, Flyleaf is
Flyleaf.
Flyleaf is your cat book. What you saw in the Frederick Douglass video with the RA that was breaking apart the words, but it was something you could do with your eyes closed, that's Haggerty. And the foundations part of one piece of that, learning letters and sounds, might be what you used with your wand.
So the Lexia that you can use on computerized, something that you can use at home that says you can use it 20 to 30 minutes a night. How do we incorporate that with the family to get the family on board that they could work with their child at night? Because I know some people maybe read to their children before they go to bed, but some people don't. So how can we encourage a parent or help them learn how to do this at home? Because a big part of it's at home.
I agree.
So saying a child is having a very difficult time, can we bring the parent in, set them down, teach them how to use that platform?
We have done that quite a bit through the pandemic out of necessity. We have Canvas requirements for each grade level for our online platform, and within that are buttons for Lexia, buttons for Dreambox, which would be the math version of that. And I will tell you that teachers they incentivize how many units. Encourage families to, a student to get 8 units a week. Do the 8 units have to happen at school, or could they happen at home? I know that conversation is something that happens at conferences. I know that there are teacher or family resources that are available through that platform, where we could even print out parent letters, and they're available in English and Spanish. But to your point, I think that putting that as even maybe a station or a spot in the hallway when we have family nights, et cetera, whether they're literacy or not, maybe that might be another opportunity to get parents more involved in that.
Because when I'm thinking if a child's falling way behind, I need to really get that parent on board as soon as possible. Before things get even, that's just what I was thinking.
And I also think that with some of these other resources that we have been fortunate enough to put in teachers' hands, the majority of those, actually all of them, are tangible resources versus computer, because computer's great, but to teach early literacy, it's not as effective as some other things. For example, for explicit phonics instruction, we use Foundations, the scope and sequence it's called Foundations, and they actually, with each unit that goes home prior to the unit and then at the closure of the unit, you have an option of to when you send it, but it's very simple for a parent to follow and to be able to support. And then they wouldn't have to be on a computer at all. I'm not anti-computer, but from K to 2.
Yeah, well, I'd like a hand.
Yes,
in your
me
hand
too. But it is nice to have options.
Any way we can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So books. Mm-hmm. Yeah, y'all might need those. Oh, this is mine.
Okay, thank you. We do have two more items. Staffing report. Dr. Joyner?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening. I can't help but find myself wishing for one of Jamie's magic wands that would help us sweep up candidates the way you got your letters up there a moment ago. But alas, I don't know that that's in our cards. We are going to talk about the 21-22 staffing report this evening. And just a general comment before jumping into the numbers, I would say if I were to describe the employment market in one word, it would be volatile. If I use two words, it would be extremely volatile. And we don't see any indication that that's going to change anytime in the near future. I think we all know the challenges that we faced with COVID, 1920, 2021, things that were pretty severe and unique to that situation, not the least of which was not being able to see in a people business face-to-face and recruiting and hiring and dealing with that. But I think what we found beyond that is we're now looking longitudinally coming out of COVID, that some of the things that happened there accelerated trends that were already happening, and in some ways exacerbated and changed it in ways we could not have foreseen happening. For example, we've all read about the Great Resignation across the country, and that was led by teachers. And that's not changing. That's still, there is a dearth of highly qualified candidates and not a lot of folks going into the profession, and that's not changing. And the way in which we're having to become more nimble in how we do things is not going to change in the near future. So I'll talk more about that as we go through some of the numbers here in just a moment. So you see the first chart in your handout this evening is one you're used to, and we looked at throughout the hiring season through the spring as we tracked what was happening for us. For the 21-22 school year, there were 409 licensed staff on teacher salary. There were 42 teachers who left, 4 retired, and 38 resigned. Those 38 resignations represent a turnover rate of 9.3%. With retirements, that represented a total of 10.2. And while in some ways that is a celebration relatively as we look across the region, we also know that this is cyclical, and there are a lot of things that play into this. Of the 20 divisions in Region 4, 12 have reported their turnover rate this year. It ranged anywhere from 8.3 all the way to 16.52%. So we ended up this year being the second lowest, which is a celebration. But double-digit turnovers are a thing that we think we're going to see now and going into the future. So we're happy about that number for this past year, but we look across the region and say, there are still challenges ahead for us, so we always want to bear that in mind. In addition to the 42 teachers leaving WPS, we had 1 director, 3 principals, 1 assistant principal, 1 gifted specialist, for a total of 48 professionally licensed staff that you see there in the chart. Support staff, we had 330 total through 21 and 22. 84 left the division, 2 retired, and 82 resigned. That gave us, the 82 was 24.8%, the 84 was 25.4%. So hence the word volatile. And as you look at licensed staff and professional licensed staff is a little bit different. Support staff is a little bit more like you see the local market and hourly rates and competition for pay and benefits. The cost to compete is very different in that environment, and it was a volatile year there for us. I know this one's a little hard to see, but hopefully you can see it on your screens. The following chart gives you historical turnover, and you're used to seeing this in the past. And as we said, last year's number, or this year's number of the 9.3 is relatively good. We benchmark 12%. I think as you look at this chart, you can see that we have to acknowledge the past 7 years, regardless of the ups and downs, represent the new normal in the employment market. So that's why we benchmark 12. And we realize we're 1 year away, as you look at those ups and downs, things happen, COVID being one, but the market is going to continue to be that way. The number of qualified candidates I just mentioned, both licensed and support staff, is at an all-time low. So the number, not only the number of candidates, but the number of qualified candidates across the board. And as I said, market competition for wages, benefits, we're at an all-time high. Double-digit turnovers is just a fact of life. Not only is there a lack of qualified candidates, but the level of qualification is at an all-time low. We've talked to you about this the last couple of years. You recall, until the last 2 years, our instructional personnel report, that's the IPALS report, was historically 99 to 100% of our licensed staff were properly endorsed or fully endorsed or highly qualified. Last year it was 89%. So that's indicative of the challenges that we're facing currently, and this is unprecedented, and I mentioned it to you last year. We're working with 56 staff members on alternative pathways to licensure. So last year that number was 42, and that was the all-time high. So some of those 42 are within the 56, but you've got a net gain of 14. So we look to renew licenses from anywhere from 70 to 90 of our staff per year. But now in addition to that, we're working with 56 others who are on alternative paths, which means that they may not be to full licensure between 1 and 3 years. If you recall, a provisional license goes for 3 years. So some challenges there as we look at the group or the N of potential hires and candidates. And then finally, one last item, and I'll mention this. I hope this is an anomaly, and I don't really know what it means yet, but we're going to watch it. But it's only October. We've already had 5 instructionally licensed staff resign. That's early. That's more than normal. Hopefully that's not a trend, but something that we'll keep an eye on, and we'll certainly be speaking more. Among professional staff departures, as in the past, and we're looking at this chart right here, relocation, retirement, accepting a teaching position in neighboring school divisions were the primary reason for why folks went someplace else, and you can see the numbers on that chart. The highest area was 23.81 relocation plan. That includes the normally expected: a spouse gets a job in another area and goes someplace, and the spouse goes with them. The distribution overall is what we have seen over the past number of years across all the areas. I was asking Cabinet this morning, how about our closest competitor, which is, well, I'll mention only one going to Loudoun County. That is a trend that we have seen. Less qualified candidates, but you're seeing more of them make quality of life and quality of professional life challenges or decisions. So it's not just the money. Frederick County, you see 6 folks left. We actually hired 12 from Frederick County this year, so we had a net gain of 6 from our closest neighbors there. In the box to the right there, you see the colored chart. As has been in years past, 57% of all our resignations were with 10 years of experience or less. That mirrors national trends, smaller numbers of individuals going into the profession. And in that 10 or less, more than half, 2/3 of those were in the 0 to 5. That's still a national trend. That's why we focus on beginning teachers, on mentorship, on a lot of efforts in that 0 to 5 area. In recruiting and hiring area, as you know, efforts now run year-round. It's not cyclical. It's year-round for looking for, finding, recruiting folks to hire. We know that our busiest time is really January to June. That's when you see the yellow charts come out. We're tracking. We talk in closed session about that. We've had continued success in hiring new candidates through our recruiting efforts. Of course, we went entirely virtually, and it has changed the way in which we do that and developed our own processes for doing that. And the majority of the recruiting events going virtually. I provided to you last week in your documents in the board retreat a report that outlined our upgrades and additions to this entire process. We're not going to spend time on that tonight. I'm sure we're going to be back together talking about the TSL grant. But that really will frame for you what not only has changed in these challenges, but because of those initiatives, what are we doing differently? How do we keep what works? How do we change what doesn't and how we innovate for the future. And you're going to see a lot of efforts focused towards this virtual environment and how we recruit and how we change our own human capital management system processes to adapt to that. So we'll talk more about that at a later time. One anticipated change this year in this area is an increase in in-person recruiting events. We're going to do all the things we've been doing virtually, but we anticipate attending maybe 15 to 20 in-person events. We just signed up, had a contact today with JMU and a new person there. So they're coming back online, and a combination of virtual and in-person. It's not just the one-shot deal where you go and in-person recruit and get some candidates. It's a combination of both of those, and really direct marketing and constant marketing and having partnerships with these colleges and universities, not unlike recruiting for NCAA and athletics and reaching down to folks as early as their sophomore year in university or college and developing a relationship for that many years until they make a decision for hire. So you're going to hear about changes that we've made there. In August, we welcomed 70 new professional staff members. Of that newly hired professional staff, 26 individuals had a professional degree. An advanced degree. They all had professional degrees, but an advanced degree. And in spite of the concerns about lack of qualified candidates, we currently have 60% of all our professional staff hold an advanced degree. And I think that's a celebration, and it speaks to the professionalism of our staff and their commitment to learning. So we should be happy about that. I'd like to finish with a celebration, and that is in our commitment to high standards and to diversity recruitment and hiring and retention. That continues, and as you can see, 32% of this year's teaching hires were minority candidates. So as you look at the demographic distribution there below, total licensed staff, that has resulted in another percentage point drop from 85 to 84% white staff and 16% minority. So while that does not yet match entirely our student demographic distribution, it does represent to date the closest that we have been to date, and that is yet another celebration and one that we're going to continue in our commitment in recruiting and hiring. So that's a review of the numbers, and I'll certainly be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Jordan. I just had one comment, and maybe just a comment. I think it was really important that Mr. Wallace said during our retreat in terms of being able to incorporate the stay interviews, right? We are all familiar with the exit interviews, but I think when you said already that we have 5 resignations and it's October, doing those stay interviews, I think, is important, where we can gain some insight in terms of why our teachers are staying, but also give us a little bit of ideas of maybe why some of them are leaving that maybe we're not able to capture, and just kind of do some comparison. So I know you said that that is something that we would definitely look to kind of incorporate, but I just wanted to say that I personally think that that would really be important, because having 5 already resign and it's October, of course, is concerning to me. Not that I'm like, waving the red flag, but definitely just something to think about.
No, I waved it first, and I want to keep the flag in our pocket and throw it when we need it. But yeah, Mr. Smith has already started to do that. We've got some initial reach outs on stay interviews. We can talk more in depth about the 5 in closed session and what has happened with those specifically, why I haven't thrown the flag yet, but it's early. So we want to look at the stay interviews. We want to have more robust exit interviews and the structure for how we do that, and also some increases on things we do on screening on the front. But that's just one of the things we have to be more nimble about. It's not just finding and recruiting and hiring, it's retention and the reasons for that specifically. So I'm sure we'll come back and share more information about that.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. All right. And last item we have is our construction update. Mr. Smith.
Hey there, good evening. I've been told I'm on the clock. So update on the Douglas School conversion. Let's see. first things first, the best news is that our electricity hookup is going to happen. We did not know if it was going to this week, and fortunately they got a hold of a transformer, and so hopefully by the end of the day on Wednesday, we will have power to the building, and all of our utilities will be hooked up with the exception of internet. And so looking good there. On a couple of things we're still waiting on. The front storefront for the main entrance are still delayed by the supply chain, and we will probably have to use a temporary measure to get into the building, to open the building, and then have that replaced at another time once the storefront gets manufactured and delivered. We're also a little bit behind on the metal panels that go on the building, on the exterior of the building. But those are our only two major holdups right now. We did adjust substantial completion date to November 15th, so that's about 2 weeks later than we had originally, or that we had talked about most recently in the last several months. We have a base asphalt going down in the parking lot this week, and so you'll start to see, it'll start to look a lot cleaner out there, and parking spaces will be put in place. We've completed walkthroughs with our movers out of the old CAO, as well as Pall Mall, and then some storage facilities that we have some of our stuff in. We walked them through that, and we're in the process of evaluating bids that we received. And right now, our plan is our furniture will arrive November 28th, so that's the Monday after Thanksgiving. They will get that installed, and then they'll spend about probably a week or so on that. And then we'll get the internet moved in and get the building ready to go the first week of December, or second week of December or so. And then the movers will come and move everyone over the second week of December, December the 12th. And that'll take about 3 days to get everything finalized there. And we'll be working as a team in the CAO to figure out how we'll keep things running smoothly during that period of time for folks. But it is going to be a process. It's going to be a process that will require patience on all of our employees' parts that are going to be part of the move, but we'll make it happen, and we're working through those plans right now. But other than that, no major issues, thankfully, and stuff that we can, not that there's no stuff that we can't overcome. Did include a picture of the boardroom there. You can see it's pretty much finished. The carpet, it's got a little splash of color in it. It doesn't. The picture makes it look. Whenever you're standing on it and you're in the room, it does. It's kind of shocking in the photograph that you see, but whenever you're in there looking at it, it fits the room very well, and as does all the other carpet in the other classrooms and stuff. So, but yeah, we're starting to move along, get things wrapped up. Yeah. And the dais is still probably not going to arrive till February at some point, but we'll get moved in and get things kicked off over there in January. Everybody's kind of looking at that carpet. I can see. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. All right. That does conclude the business portion of our public meeting this evening. Dr. Pierce-Gonzalez, I think we do have need for closed session.
Pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia, I motion that the board convene in closed session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters, including prospective candidates for employment and the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees, specifically substitute teachers and support staff, coaching stipends, club/activity stipends, and musical stipends, and resignations.
Dr. Pierce-Gonzalez and a second by Mr. Wallace. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you. We are now in closed session.